David Benavidez might be an actual monster. His last 4 wins have actually been quite fantastic. Of Caleb Plant, Boo Boo Andrade, I don't rate highly, but Vostik, and now David Morrell. I might have been sleeping on this guy, which is pretty funny because I've been pretty outspoken about David Benavidez not beating Canelo Alvarez. Well, the guy's a monster, and now we know it. So, what's the deal? What are we going to get next? Are we going to get Beterbiev? Are we going to get Canelo? Are we going to get Bivol? You know, that all depends, I guess, what goes on the 22nd. But we're going to talk about everything about that fight, guys. Let's just be real. David Benavidez is the man of the hour. He got the dub. He got the win. He showed some good things in this fight too, guys. David Morrell came out and did the right things. I felt like he was winning the early rounds, and Benavidez had to adjust and had to, I don't want to say weather that storm because he's the storm, to be honest with you. He had to make sure that he didn't drop the ball and get clipped and get knocked down. And we know that one knockdown happened, wasn't a real knockdown. If you think that was a real knockdown, get your eyes checked because it wasn't. It was more or less David Benavidez tripping over his own feet and going to the ground. But luckily for David Benavidez, David Morrell hit him after the bell, which that wasn't good. Obviously, it's cheating, right? But it took that extra 10-8 point away and gave him a 9-8 score. So it really didn't let David Morrell kind of play catch up there, if it makes sense. But what I really like, man, what did I like from Benavidez? It was a lot, bro. So like a lot of his offense is like, I'm pouring it on you. And that's not what he did against David Morrell. Instead of pouring it on, he really did select his shots carefully. He really wanted to land the power. So Morrell has that high guard, and he had a lot of peeling the guard. So he's got his guard, and David Benavidez literally pulled away the glove, which, I mean, that can get you countered. Yet, I mean, everything you do is going to have a counter. I'm gonna put the link of this book in the description. I don't have it on my hand, but Boxing by Edwin Hazlett, he says everything has a counter. So if you're going to open up and throw, you're opening yourself up to counters. The only way to not be countered is to not engage and not punch. So Benavidez, he's pulling down the glove, not optimal, but with Morrell staying in the high guard and just kind of shelling up, pull that guard down and land that hook. And that's what Benavidez did. But I think one of the more interesting parts about it was how he kind of broke down David Morrell. Again, like I said, David Morrell came out, he looked like the better fighter. He was landing uppercuts through the guard, he was landing shots, and kind of getting the best of David Benavidez, if we're being honest. But what Benavidez was doing was working with what he was being given. So Morrell's got the high guard. What are you going to do? I'm going to pound the body. And he found the body with the hooks a lot in this fight. And that's what took away the steam of David Morrell. That's what hurt David Morrell in the long of the fight. Now, he didn't obviously wobble David Morrell to a really big extent. He might have buzzed him a couple times, but those body shots, make no mistake about it, they did him in. So I like the body work. I like the peeling of the guard. I like the pacing also of David Benavidez. I felt like what he was doing, kind of taking his time and not going on like the Caleb Plant fight where he put on a show, like none of that. Okay, so David Morrell, he's a really good opponent. Might be the best win he has, next to maybe Vostik, who's kind of washed, but still, it was one of those wins that was like, boy, Benavidez might be the truth. And if he fights Beterbiev or Bivol next, it's going to be a really fun fight. But we're going to talk about it in a second. But first, we got to talk about the future of David Morrell. So David Morrell is 11-1 now. He was 11-0 before this fight. And he's a southpaw. Doesn't have amazing wins necessarily. But what he's shown in his wins is like, wow, this guy's kind of special. He did a lot of good things in this fight too. And we're going to talk about what David Morrell did well. The uppercut, he worked very well. He wasn't scared of the power of David Benavidez. He wasn't, he didn't believe the hype. He believed in himself, which, that's cliche to sound. That sounds so cliche. And it is you got to just believe yourself. Like, no, it's a lot more than that. It's going to the gym, putting in the hours in the gym, putting in your time, getting the boxing matches, all along that lines. But David Morrell showed that he's an elite fighter. I don't know if he can go back down to 168 because this was at 174. It was his second fight at 174. I don't know if he has the size to do, or he doesn't have the size to do, I guess you would say. I don't know if he's small enough to go down to 178, or 168, I'm sorry. But, man, he could beat David Benavidez. I truly believe that. Now, will he beat him most of the time, half the time, 1 time out of 10? Like that, he has the skills to beat a David Benavidez, that's for sure. Just how often, I don't know. Benavidez, one thing we didn't talk about was like his iron chin, and Morrell was connecting. He was landing flush, but he just couldn't, break through. He couldn't find those shots that like really hurt David Benavidez, and that's no fault of his own. Like that's a testament to what David Benavidez brings to the table: iron chin, lots of power, and smart shot selection. So, I think David Morrell has a high ceiling. He has he can be a world champion at 174. Really can change the game. He can not change it necessarily, but he can really shake things up and become a champion at light heavyweight. I just don't know if he can do it through Benavidez. I don't know if it's that easy. Beterbiev's undisputed, so like it would have to involve him fighting Beterbiev, or maybe not. And, he's fighting Bivol next, so one of those two, which very hard fights for David Morrell, but very fun fights for David Morrell at the same time. Yeah, I think he could be a champion. I don't know how. Like he has the skills, and he shows me that he's a champion. Or he's a champion level, I think. So, I hope the best for him. He's a fun fighter, fun boxer. 11-1, very, very little experience in relative to David Benavidez is now 30 fights. He's 30-0. So yeah, David Benavidez versus Beterbiev or Bivol. So they fight the 22nd, which is 2-3 weeks time, something like that. Obviously, Artur Beterbiev won the first fight in a very close decision. A lot of people had Bivol winning. I don't have the dog in the hunt, really. I like both fighters. So, I can see it either way for those guys. But regardless, they're fighting again. The last crescendo. Thank you to our overlords, the Saudis themselves, for bringing us these big fights. Speaking of Canelo versus Terrence Crawford, has been not announced but agreed to, which is really interesting, and we'll do a video on that one day, but that's an interesting fight. But I also found it interesting that I've seen reports that Canelo is also going, so that's going to be in September, but also in May for his annual Cinco de Mayo fight, he's going to fight Jake Paul. Whack, right? I told myself I wasn't going to cover Jake Paul after that that Mike Tyson thing, but anyways, we're not here to talk about Canelo and Jake Paul and all that. We're here to talk about David Benavidez. Bivol, Beterbiev, so they fight, right? Okay, so that's where we were going with this. They fight on the 22nd, and that fight was very close. And I want to take a look at both of these matches. So, Bivol kind of does well with long fighters. He's a long fighter himself. He has, that really good jab, that really good stopping power, but it didn't quite work against Beterbiev like he normally has it. Like he was stopping Canelo in his tracks with it, right? Just a long jab and then coming forward. And I do think Bivol can beat Beterbiev in this rematch that's coming up in a couple weeks. And I think that's going to happen. I have to rewatch the first fight. But, man, against David Benavidez, I don't know how Bivol fares. He's not going to crack his chin. Dmitrii Bivol's not a very hard hitter. But he can also, he's a much better boxer. Bivol, that is. He's a much better boxer than David Benavidez. Benavidez is a heavy hitter, a game fighter. He's a very fun fighter, very talented fighter. But I don't know how he would fare against Bivol necessarily. I think Bivol's a harder matchup than Beterbiev is. That's not saying that Beterbiev wouldn't beat David Benavidez. And we're going to talk about that in a second here. But that's just saying, like, the old saying is, yeah, styles make fights. And Dmitrii Bivol is a heck of a boxer. He's beaten a lot better boxers than David Benavidez. He's beaten a lot he's fought and not been knocked out by a lot more heavy hitters or a lot heavier hitters than David Benavidez, right? Dmitrii Bivol, for example. So he's not going to be scared of his power. He's not going to be scared of, like, the pace, because Artur Beterbiev drove toward pace in their first fight, and he's surely about to do it in this next fight. So that's that matchup. But then the Beterbiev fight, I said it's like the better matchup, but, like, is it? Eventually, David Benavidez's chin's going to go. He's young. How old is Benavidez? Because he's super, super young. He's 28 years old. You don't want to be taking that much damage, right? So, question is, like, can Artur Beterbiev find David Benavidez's chin and actually do something to it? I think he can. Like, there's not a heavy hitter right now in boxing, maybe, than Artur Beterbiev at size parity. Obviously, you know y'all know what I mean. Like, he knocks everybody out. Only guy he hasn't knocked out is Dmitrii Bivol in his last fight. He is the undisputed champ, but, like, David Morrell was finding his chin. Artur Beterbiev can find his chin. Question is, like, the power discrepancy, a former 168 fighter versus the yoked Artur Beterbiev. Like, who you going with here when it comes to hitting the power punching bag, right? And Beterbiev has shown that he can find the chin of very good boxers, very elusive boxers, and put them down. Like, man, I don't know. So, like, I said Beterbiev might be the better matchup for David Benavidez, only because, like, Beterbiev will let him get in those wild exchanges that he likes to get into. But, like, even then, I don't know, like, if David Benavidez actually stands a shot against a fighter like Beterbiev, a monster in his own right? So, I think, you know, we'll in time we'll see. First, we got to see on the 22nd who wins between Bivol and Beterbiev, and we can further go into, you know, what that would mean, because it's got to be the next fight. But we got to stop talking about Canelo versus David Benavidez. I'm over it, guys. I really am. I don't have any interest in talking about Canelo, and he's going on about it. He's keep on bringing up Canelo's name. Like, if I beat Canelo, or if I beat Dmitrii Bivol, because he went on record and said, I hope it's Dmitrii Bivol that I fight. I hope I fight Dmitrii Bivol because he's got to win over Canelo, and that would mean I'm better than Canelo. It's like, bro, boxing math don't work like that. You know? Sugar Ray beat all of, you know, Roberto Duran and all that, but, like, just because Roberto Duran beat Sugar Ray in the first fight doesn't mean he automatically beats, you know, Wilfred Benitez and Marvin Hagler for sure, Tommy Hearns. We know he lost to those last two, and then obviously he lost to Sugar Ray Leonard again. So it doesn't work like that. I'm just tired of the Canelo thing, because we know what David Benavidez is trying to do. He's trying to weight bully Canelo. Like, the same thing that, you know, everybody wants to bring up, oh, what about the Bivol fight and the Sergey Kovalev fight, yada yada. It's like, yeah, Canelo didn't look good in those fights. Even the Kovalev where he knocked him out, he stayed in his shell most of the time. He stayed in his shell, and he got beat up. Not really beat up. Kovalev didn't beat him up, but he did, like, stay in his shell, let Kovalev kind of punch himself out, and then opened up, what was it, round 7 or something like that. And then obviously we know the Dmitrii Bivol fight, like, Canelo didn't look great in that, obviously. Kind of bad. So yeah, man, I'm tired of hearing about this, because it's like, okay, you were going to weight bully the guy and go in there and volume him like he doesn't like, but you're going to be way bigger. So, okay, great. Jaime Munguia did it. But I get the allure of fighting and beating a Canelo Alvarez, but why do you have to be such a bigger fighter than him? Like, you obviously barely made 168. So, like, what was the point? What's the point? You're gonna beat a smaller fighter? Okay, so what? It's not a big deal. Like, now you're at 178 and or 172, whatever light heavyweight is. I can't remember. Boxing's freaking weight class. 174. You're at that weight, and so what? You know, you obviously Canelo had to go up and push his absolute weight limit to fight at 174. Looked fat at 174 both times he fought there. So yeah, I'm tired of hearing it. Let's not ever talk about David Benavidez versus Canelo again, because it doesn't matter. It doesn't. The fight probably won't happen, and if it does, like, you know, Benavidez might be undisputed champion by then. Gosh, if he beats Beterbiev or Bivol, but I just don't want to talk about it until then, because it's not a fun fight, honestly. Instead, we're getting Terrence Crawford versus Canelo and possibly Jake Paul. He might be cashing out. But anyways, guys, yeah, boxing. We talked about, you know, a lot of stuff. Boxing history. I pitched this in one of my previous videos, and I forgot I made this video about gimmick boxing fights. Talking, you know, Muhammad Ali fighting NFL fighters, Shaq fighting Oscar De La Hoya, Jack Dempsey fighting a pro wrestler. Yeah, all these fights happen in boxing, and it's weird. Boxing's always loved a gimmick fight. And this video is all about gimmick fights.